Montgomery County jury returned a verdict in the case of LaFelix Thomas tonight. After hours of deliberation, the jury said Thomas is not guilty of the murder of his longtime girlfriend, Jeanine Gravette. Now, prosecutors had several key witnesses, including a medical examiner who claimed Gravette's injuries were not caused by a car accident, instead by a brutal beating. But the defense claimed no evidence showed Thomas beat Gravette after the wreck they were in together. In fact, they claimed Thomas was distraught after the crash, begging paramedics to save her. Ultimately, the jury agreed and found Thomas did not cause Gravette's death. Now, defense attorney Adam Parker says this verdict was years in the making.
Justice was served. My client tragically lost his fiance. Mother lost her daughter, but it was the result of an accident. I hate the district attorney's office, state of Alabama made us go through this trial, but I'm glad that justice was finally served.
That not guilty verdict comes 7 years after Gravette's death in 2018.